Accessing the database. Let's learn to work with databases using PyMySQL. We'll learn to create a table, insert, read, update and delete records, and commit, rollback and disconnect. We'll also discuss some errors in transaction. There are many ways to work with databases using Python. It supports MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, SQLite, Sybase, Microsoft SQL Server, MSQL, and Microsoft Access, among others. For Python 3, we'll use the PyMySQL module to explain. PyMySQL is a pure Python MySQL client library. To work with it, we have two requirements. For an implementation of Python, you need one of CPython, PyPy, and IronPython with the mentioned versions or higher. And for MySQL, you need any of MySQL 4.1 or higher and MariaDB 5.1 or higher. For now, we'll assume that we have all the requirements fulfilled. Let's first get the database ready. Step 1 is to create a database using MySQL. Do this the way you create a database in MySQL. Create a user and grant it permissions. Now import PyMySQL in Python and use it to connect to this database. We've prepared the database. Now let's create a table. Create a cursor. If a table by this name already exists, drop it and replace it. Now we define the query. Create a table with the name student. It should have the fields first name, last name, age and enrollment number. Executing this query creates the table. Time to insert a record into this table. This is the query. Insert these values into the table student. Under try, we execute this query and commit the write to the database. If this raises an exception, say the transaction was incomplete, this except handles it by performing a rollback on it. Let's write a query to read these records. Select star from student where age is greater than 22. Under try, execute this query and fetch everything into this variable results set. Now for each record in this, use the values to initialize first name, last name, age and enrollment number. Then print everything. And if something goes wrong, print an apology. For reading records, we have the following methods. Fetch one to get the immediate next row from the result set of the query. Fetch all to get the entire result set except the records already extracted. And the row count attribute to get the number of records affected by a call to the execute function. To update a record or say to make a change in one of the records in the table, we use this query. Update the student table, set the age to age plus 1 for all records where the age is less than or equal to 22. We execute this query and commit the transaction. If an exception occurs, we roll back the transaction. To delete a record, delete from student where the age is greater than 23. Execute the query and commit the transaction. If an exception occurs, perform a rollback on the transaction. In all the previous examples, we performed the commit, rollback, and disconnect operations. The commit function finalizes the write to the database. This is the commit operation. Rollback undoes any recent changes to the database and takes it to a past, safe checkpoint. And close closes the connection to a database so any resources held may be released. We keep saying we roll back if there's an exception, but what kind of an exception does it observe? Let's see. Error is the base class for all errors here and it inherits from standard error. Interface error is for errors about the module. Database error occurs for issues with the database. Operational error denotes that a connection to a database may have been lost or a database may have not been selected yet. And data error indicates an error in the data. We have an internal error for errors internal to the module, and when there's damage to relational integrity, there's an integrity error. A programming error may be caused by bad table names or by attempts to create duplicate databases. And when we try to call functionality it doesn't support, we raise a not supported error. Operational error, data error, internal error, integrity error, programming error, and not supported error are subclasses of database error. And a warning is issued for non-fatal issues. With this, we conclude our session on accessing the database with Python. See you around in the practice session.